Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Merrimack School Board this Monday evening, September 21st, 2015. Would you all rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. That takes us to item number 2 on tonight's agenda, approval of the September 8th, 2015 minutes. Is there a motion made by Mr. Powell, seconded by Vice Chair Barnes? Any corrections? Vice Chair Barnes.
Just a couple. On page 4, it's the same thing twice. And it's just a stylistic point. On lines 146 and 167 RTI, it should be all caps. Because it is an abbreviation. And on page 10, line 472, at some point I'll be able to get to it. And it was that Vice Chair Barnes attended the New Hampshire School Boards Association the afternoon of September 8th and heard the presentation. I thought I had one more, so I'm just going to do a quick scan, if you would mind. There was one more. Page 5, line 203. And I think I might need some clarification, but I think I have it right. So on line 203, it says that 2 carts each will go into social studies and English classrooms. I believe it's going into the departments, and the classrooms within those departments will share it. So you'll be getting 2 racks per classroom. You'll be getting 2 racks per department, one for social studies and one for English.
That's my recollection.
Okay, so I feel good about that. And that's all I have.
Great. Any other corrections? Mr. Schneider.
Let's see, I got a couple. Give me a sec while I get in there. Okay, on page 7, line 317 and 318, concerns about liability designate the Merrimack High School bus loop and the front of the school as being a priority repair project, because it was also the pavement in front of the school as well as the bus loop around the back that we talked about as one liability. Because remember all the cracking that was in the front? So that was one. Next on page 9 on line 406, I think it was Board Member Schneider asked the public and non-public sessions be in the same building. Right now it just says board member, that infamous random board member. Let's see, and then on page 10 there's a couple. And this is actually a question for Shannon on line 442. Vice Chair Barnes received 3 thank you emails from parents in regard to the logic model. Was it thank you emails about the logic model or just emails about the logic model?
Thank you emails about expressing concerns about parent involvement in the
So
model.
Thank you to you for having brought that forward.
Right, that was an important thing to them,
Okay.
and they thanked you for being addressed.
Right, so we might want to just clarify that it was thank you for your bringing forth that part of it. Thanking you for, right, just a little clearer. And then finally, at the bottom of the page on line 481, Board Member Schneider had a last-minute conflict and was therefore unable to attend the Merrimack Safeguard meeting. It wasn't the Safeguard had a conflict, I did, so just clarify that. And that's it.
Great. Any other corrections? I think most folks caught the ones that I had. I did have 1 or 2 others, I believe. On page 9, line 399, the content of the district logic model will be on the next consent agenda. If we can just insert the word consent. On page 10, line 435, the thank you I received from a parent was for the school calendar, not the council calendar. And that's all that I had. So with that, Seeing no further changes, we will put the motion to a vote. All those in favor of approving the September 8th, 2015 minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? 1. So the motion carries 401 with Board Member Guagliumi abstaining. And what is the student rep's opinion? In favor. Thank you. So that now takes us to item number 3, public participation. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board. All we ask is for you to step to the microphone. Is there anyone looking to address the board under public participation? Seeing none, we will close public participation. We will move to item number 4, the consent agenda. Dr. Mark McLaughlin.
Thank you. On consent tonight, we have the following nominations: Patty Schwinnard, part-time nurse at Merrimack High School, and Mark Tyers, special education teacher at Mastrocola Upper Elementary School.
And
I apologize. Approval of the 2015-2020 Merrimack School District Logic Model.
thank you. Mr. Schneider,
I move we approve the consent agenda as read.
is there a second? Made by Vice Chair Barnes. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as read signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0-0. And what is the student rep's opinion? Thank you. Oh, okay. Yep. Okay, so we are waiting for one of our guests to arrive, and so we will table item number 5 for the time being and skip to item number 6 on the agenda. Second review of capital improvement plan for 2016 to 2022. In your packets, you will have the materials that were provided to us at our last meeting in great detail by Business Administrator Chevanel and Maintenance Director Tom Tuso. It's at this meeting that we'll undertake a discussion and begin work and possibly conclude work in terms of either modifying or moving forward a capital improvement plan. Is there any discussion in terms of the process that will follow? Any change that we make or propose to make to the capital improvement plan should be made through a motion with a second discussion and then ultimately a vote. When we're done with motions, we will move the capital improvement plan as a whole. Mr. Schneider.
Okay, I will break the ice. I'd like to move.
Get to it.
Yes. Well, I figure the best way to approach this is to make some motions and start talking through it because we sort of discussed it last week, unless anybody objects to this.
I have no objection.
Okay. I'd like to, as a start, move that we, and I don't have the number in front of me, but I move that we split the O'Gara Drive out from the bus loop in the front of the school on the paving project, and I'm going to rely on Mr. Chevanel to give me what the total of the two components are. I know it was on the slide, but I forgot to write it down.
Do you recall, Mr. Chevanel?
In the CIP, I'm looking at it combined, 408, 756, that's where you're at, right?
That's correct.
And what was the split of that?
It was on the slide that you showed.
227.
I believe so, yeah.
I think it's 227 is the first thing that appears. We were just doing it this morning.
Yeah, I know.
227.
For the loop in the front of the school.
For the loop in front of the school.
You move the loop be done 2016, 17, and then we'll just put the amount in. But it's 200, it's a little less than 250,000.
Right.
Okay. So the motion is to move keep the bus loop in the front of the school in, and then push O'Gara Drive out, in my initial proposal anyway, out by a year in the CIP.
Okay, so the motion is to move O'Gara Drive for, what did we say the amount? 227 roughly?
Less than 250,000.
Okay. From the year 2016-17 to the year 2017-18. Motion made by Board Member Schneider, seconded by Vice Chair Barnes. Do you want to speak to that, Board Member Schneider?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I mean, I think, at least my viewpoint is that we need to look at I hate to, this is a commonly used phrase, but needs versus wants on the capital improvement, especially given the fact that the roof, the middle school roof is now there, and really it's something it's urgent we need to do. So in looking at these, are a couple of ideas that I had on here, and one of them was to look at where we are with the loop in the front of the school in O'Gara Drive. I think that if we could be somewhat conservative and break it apart, I think that the loop in the front of the school is in worse condition than O'Gara Drive is. Plus, we know that with O'Gara Drive, there's potential other things we may want to discuss surrounding it. So if we can make potentially a clean break and discuss those and have those two separate, that's
Okay.
what I'd prefer.
Vice Chair Barnes.
That being said, I believe that the agreement with the town ends in 18. So if I have my druthers, I would actually move it to either 1819 or 1920 once we know what our agreement with the town will be for that space.
The only,
Yeah,
can I
go ahead.
go
Yeah,
back
we're
and
good.
forth? I just looking at protocol here. My only concern is that we could do that, but we might run into the situation like we did with the roof this summer, that we've moved it out too far and huge potholes that can't be patched show up. So for the purpose of this discussion, I'd like to be, again, conservative and just move it out 1 year. I know my experience last year is by trying to balance the CIP. We saw how far that got us based on urgent things that happened. So I'm trying to make it a simple cut or simple move this time.
Ms. Guagliumi.
I agree. Also agree with moving it out. I would be more inclined to move it out just next year, because looking at the 2018-19 line items, there's already quite a few stacked for that year. I thought maybe next year we could revisit it and then decide from there if it made sense to move it out one more year.
Yep. And I was actually, when I was making that suggestion, I was looking at 1819 having the MES and JMUs, which is in the neighborhood per se, and would be easily a tetherable project.
Yep.
And at that point, we'll already be engaged in discussions with the town, so we'll kind of know the direction where the tennis courts will be going. So you're in the neighborhood, and also that year only, and I don't say this term lightly, only has a total of 2.5 million versus next year, which has 3.126. So that those were the two things that kind of went into the methodology of my suggestion.
I think though that those bottom line numbers on this sheet are a little deceiving, in that the 3.1 million in next year's is the whole cost of the central office SAU building, which if we bond it, which we would most certainly do, the cost would actually be like $36,000 in that year and $265,000 in the next year. So what that means is you'd remove roughly $2 million from that year and add 265, right? So the following year would be up around 3.1. So I think the way that this is structured is perhaps deceiving in terms of the year-over-year cost.
And thank you for that point, because it did change my perception of that altogether. But still, I look at the discussions with the town council as being imperative to the direction we should take with that spot. So unless Tom Tussaud gives us different data points to change our minds.
I agree with that. Yes, Mr. Marcus.
I know that Mr. Schneider had mentioned needs versus wants, but I would still like to express that the paving of O'Gara Drive would be very much appreciated by the student body, because there are times in the morning, especially after winter when the potholes fill with water, that it essentially becomes a one-lane road because buses have to go into the other lane or cars have to, and it causes traffic problems. And again, this is from not a logistical point of view, but it would, I know we would all appreciate it being done sooner than 2019-20.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus, for sharing the student's perspective. Yes, Mr. Schneider.
And as somebody who drives that road, I would also love to do it too, but at issue is just where we are. Just to bring, when we look at CIPs like this, we look at the whole total amount, and we balance them all up. So I understand what you're saying, but these are hard decisions that we're making at the table tonight. I mean, don't think that we're willy-nilly flipping these in the air, because there's some other things we're going to talk about that have impacts as well. So, but I understand what you're saying for sure.
Along those lines, I would reiterate what Mr. Schneider said and go so far as to say, there are 3 items on this list that when I listened to Mr. Tuso and Mr. Chevenel that were critical for the coming year. One was the roof at the middle school, which is at the point of failure if we don't do something. It's beyond patchable, and that's $1.1 million. The other one is the high school track, which we've now talked about for over a year. We've patched it. It's passable, but no more beyond this year. That's another $430,000. And then we have the air ventilation system at the high school, which is 40 years old, as I recall, or close to it, and not up to spec. It's the kitchen ventilation. We risk incidents, fire, right, all sorts of things. So you add all of those up, and we're already talking about over $2 million. And so, to Mr. Schneider's points, as I look at this, what we need to do is balance those competing objectives, and we need all of them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on this list. And it's why they either say necessary or urgent. It's really just a matter of what can we do when. So, any further discussion on the motion at hand? Okay, seeing none, we'll put the motion to a vote. The motion is to move the O'Gara Drive portion of the 2016-17 paving item on the capital improvement plan and put that in 2017-2018. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0-0. What's the student rep's opinion?
In favor, after hearing your responses.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Are there other motions? Mr. Powell, and then I'll go to Vice Chair Barnes.
I would like to talk about the bleachers, and I want to, if I can, do a 2-in-1 motion because it affects both. So the first part, I move that we take the bleachers in Smith Gym from 2018-19, move it next year out to 19-20, and take the bleachers at the high school, I guess we're referring to them as the visitors stands, and move them from 16-17 to 18-19 in place of the Smith Gym bleachers.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Discussion. Made
by Mr. Schneider. Mr. Powell, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah. Yes. This has been one that I've gone back and forth on, to be honest with you, because it's the first time that it's shown up on the capital improvement plan, and it pops in to be done for the following year. While I understand that there are some issues there that need repairs, I think the repairs can be taken care of in the operating budget to make the bleachers usable for the next coming years. And again, it's just a balancing act, trying to even everything out to give us as much leverage as we can for the projects that are truly necessary.
Okay. Further discussion. Vice Chair Barnes.
To the point of the bleachers by the track, I don't know if it's going to impact the project of the track itself, because we're going to be doing a retaining wall. I'm assuming not, but the biggest point I think they were making at the last meeting was also ADA compliance. That really was not the safest way to have a bleacher setup. That should more be like what we have on the home side, which has more railings and segmentation, so that's easier for our for people at our facilities to navigate. So,
Yeah, Tom and I were having a conversation about this morning. We talk every day, sometimes twice a day, sometimes 3-4 times a day, and the conversation kind of revolved around the bleachers and the track. The track has been repaired. It was repaired last week. This is information that he gave me today. The gentleman from Maine Track and Field will do the repair in the spring to get us through, and that's it for him. He does not want to come back as a company representative and do any more repairs on that track for fear of liability. So he is finished with it. We can get another company to repair it, but we can't. So I would suggest that I would reclassify that as necessary and make the track urgent, but the bleachers wouldn't be affected by that project, and the ADA compliance piece can still be steered over into the area of the new bleachers if you need that. So we don't have to do the bleachers with the track.
okay. So there are a couple questions I have now from your statements. First is I think that we talked about they're just not ADA-friendly bleachers,
They're not.
and they're not. So, but the ADA compliance wasn't about the track; it was definitely about the bleachers that you were discussing.
Correct.
So that's not going to change if we don't do the work. That being said, I would rather put it out 1 year than 2, only because we are going to have some reductions. Since Chris's clarification point, that $1.945 million on the facilities will be bonded. That 1 year I'd be comfortable with, 2 years I'm not, for the MHS bleachers. And so if it was moved 1 year, I'd support the motion. With the JMU's bleachers and the Smith gym, I just wanted some insight. I know it's a balancing act for numbers, but then why wouldn't we move it back to 17-18? Because again, that's a light year versus moving it out to 19-20 where it's 1.2 million. So, we'd be looking at, close numbers in that case. So for that reason, I would actually say if you moved it out 1 year, moved it in 1 year, I'd be happier with it. And the second thing, do we need to make a motion to make something from necessary to urgent later on based on that suggestion?
We can entertain motions to change any aspect of
Okay.
the CIP.
I'll keep
I
that in
think
mind.
for our purposes, folks have been most focused, I think, on what's where
Yeah,
and
exactly.
when. And certainly in terms of describing them, I think it's entirely appropriate if we think a change needs to be made.
Okay, thank you.
To move that.
So-
Ms. Gualiumi.
I think along the lines of Shannon's point with the bleachers, if let's say they were done the same year, let's say the MHS went out 1 year and the Smith gym went back 1 year, earlier 1 year, could we get any buying power or some, being able to leverage the fact that we have a bigger project? And that would be a question that I would have, that in that case it would make a lot of sense to me if that were possible.
One are indoors, one are outdoors, so it'll be two totally different companies
Totally
anyway.
different vendors? Okay,
Yeah.
well, just a thought.
Good idea.
It was a good idea. Mr. Schneider.
So in the spirit of my first comment that I made about conservatively doing things, I sort of concur that if we're going to move the bleachers out, let's move them out by a year so we can evaluate next year what they're like, only because we're not sure. My belief is that I understand the ADA compliance issue. I get it. We do have ADA compliant bleachers next to it, so if we do have that situation, we do have something to accommodate a spectator with an ADA. If we had nothing at all, it might be a different story. Do I think we need to address it? Absolutely, but I'd prefer we move that out by 1 year and leave Smith Gym just where it is And then when we come into CIP next year, we let administration tell us what the conditions are with recommendations, and then the board at that time talks about it. Again, my experience last year of trying to do that multi-year balancing act obviously came back and wasn't fruitful, so I'd rather we just focus on 1 year and sort of leave it like that.
Right. Can I ask another clarifying question to Mr. Chevenel? The bleachers themselves, I understood, but beyond ADA compliance, that there might be structural concerns, not unlike the high school gymnasium bleachers that we had patched and welded and got through with over time, but reached a point at which we couldn't certify them beyond a certain capacity. Do these bleachers fall into a similar category, and is it something in which time is a factor?
In speaking with Tom and going over the issues with these bleachers, it's something that needs to be addressed. They haven't seen the usage and the punishment of the other bleachers over the course of the years. There are areas where there are welds that have been broken, that have been repaired, but nothing to the extent of the ones in the high school.
Okay.
So this is being more, it's going to have to be done in the next few years, but it isn't urgent right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Schneider.
Yeah, I remember Tom last week saying that, because we sort of got to whether there's structural, and he indicated what you did, that he didn't think it was a near-term structural issue. So I didn't think that this year was a critical one as far as the structure anyway was concerned. So.
Okay. Is there further discussion on the motion on the table? Yes, Ms. Guglielmi.
I guess, the question is if Davis was willing to move it so it didn't push it out 2 years, would he be willing to reframe the motion, or is you still want to leave it at the 2 years?
What are your thoughts?
I'm seeing the logic that the other board members have shared, which is that pushing it 2 years and pushing the J. Muse bleachers out a year may not make the most sense, and that doing the high school bleachers by the track next year, maybe in combination with the J. Muse bleachers, might make better sense in terms of balancing out the impact of capital projects as well as dealing with it. But certainly in terms of the high school bleachers by the track, pushing it out 1 year.
So I had gone through this whole logic game before you had brought to our attention the fact that the number is skewed a little with the fact that the SAU building and special services are in there. So 17-18 is actually going to be a much lower amount, but 18-19 is going to be a higher amount, correct?
18-19 will be higher by about $265,000, putting it roughly at 3.1 or 3.2 currently that's in there, where next year, it's not next year, 2017, 2018, in terms of our planning, would be reduced by 1.9 million, so it would be roughly another.
Okay. Then I'm fine with amending my motion if I could.
Sure.
To moving the high school bleachers at $320,000 into 2017-18, and moving the Smith Gym bleachers at $140,000 backwards to 17-18.
Okay, and I believe Mr. Schneider seconded that and re-seconds the motion. Okay. Further discussion. It's like the dead horse. It's been beaten. Okay. We will vote this then. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0-0. And what is the student rep's opinion?
I'm in favor.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any additional motions? Vice Chair Barnes.
I move that we shift the window replacement for Merrimack High School of $180,000 to 17-18.
Okay. Is there a second? seconded by Mr. Schneider. Would you like to speak to it?
Honestly, this is all in response to the amount for roofing. Some of the initiatives we talked about for last year's budget that we did not get to accomplish. The one that comes to front of mind for me is the Thorntons Ferry preschool. And so when we think about those capital investments that will be in our operating budget, we need to consider the capital improvement projects as well. So for that reason, I'm looking at that being a higher priority right now for us to give them the funding they need to get that established.
Great. Further discussion. Mr. Schneider.
If Shannon had not brought it up, I was going to bring it up as well. I mean, having been in that building when those same windows were there a very long time ago, as long as I know that there's rods you got to put in to keep them locked and things, but given the conversation we had about energy savings and the window factor into it or whatever, I think that while we need to do it, let's make sure we pick a good year that it doesn't impact us as much. So,
Okay, good. Any further discussion? Mr. Marcus.
And I just wanted to say that as far as actually being in the classrooms, the windows aren't really a noticeable detriment. Like, I asked my English teacher who was in one of the classrooms, I think, and she said that aside from being an inconvenience, she wouldn't have guessed that they were that old.
Great. That's good input. Don't. Okay, any further discussion on the topic? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion. The motion is to move the $180,000 Merrimack High School window replacements from 2016 to 2017-18. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, none. That carries 5-0-0. And the student rep's opinion.
In favor.
Wonderful, thank you. Mr. Schneider.
So just a checkpoint to where we're at here. We're keeping a scratch sheet on the side. We started out at $3.25 million for the year for capital programs. We've trimmed off enough money to bring us down to approximately $2.5 million. That's assuming that the paving amount was about $250 max, the way that was given to us. So far we've trimmed it down to $2.5 million. I had walked into this week, or last week, can't remember when it was, thinking that I was going to also ask Tom about the heat wheel over the middle school, the high school cafeteria. He's not here tonight, but fortunately when we were at the SAU office the other day, he happened to be there and I ran the idea by him, and he basically said that, as we said, it's 40 years old. The other thing he reminded is in the current configuration, it is the primary heat source for the entire cafeteria stage area. There is some supplemental heat on the side extension where we used to have our school board meetings, but it's like baseboard, something that would like warm your toes, and that's about it. So to me, we've kicked this can down the road a long time. But I had to ask the question to see, because we're in this serious one. So based on that conversation, I would not propose that we move the ventilation system over the cafeteria based on that discussion.
Great. Mr. Powell.
So I think at this point I'd like to move that we change the priority on the track, upgrade it from necessary to urgent, in an effort to get this set and put on the budget for 16-17.
Okay, so the motion was made and Vice Chair Barnes seconded the motion. Do you want to speak further to it?
No, I don't think so.
Any further discussion? Vice Chair Barnes.
I just think that when it comes to, this is the next step for this is going to be, we're also going to go with the planning board. And so I definitely want to see, when we do go for the planning board, of kind of a comprehensive document to really sell the point that this can't wait, because they've been known to reprioritize our priorities for us. And it's a safety issue, obviously. It's not only for the students, but we know the community at large uses it as well. So for that reason, I think they can look at that perspective, and we need to really drive that point home.
Yep. Ms. Gualiumi.
And along the same line, to really emphasize the fact that we can't even get repairs on it anymore. I mean, that really puts it into a really urgent situation.
Yeah, I think for me that's what takes it from necessary to urgent. Not that I would be an advocate for continuing to patch it, but we can't even patch it if we want to. Therefore, it's urgent. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor of reclassifying the track upgrade from necessary to urgent signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0-0. Student rep?
In favor.
Thank you, sir. Any other motions to be had? Seeing, we can, yeah, certainly. If we've done all the action that we have on it.
Okay, then I'd like to make a motion, please.
Sure.
I move that we accept the capital improvement plan as changed this evening.
Is there a second? Made by Ms. Guagliumi. Discussion?
Just real quick to highlight what Shannon said is that when this does go to the planning board, the urgency of these issues is presented. I hope that you'll let us know. I know that you'll let us know when you're going before the planning board, and hopefully, I encourage my fellow board members to attend as well to show a solidarity behind this.
Further discussion? Mr. Schneider.
Yeah, I concur with what Davis said. I think that we've made the right decisions. It's hard this year because, especially with the roof being brought in, but it's the right thing to do to preserve the infrastructure in the district, as well as make sure that we have the safety of the students around the track specifically take care. So I would like it to be less, obviously, but I think it's, given what the hand we're dealt here, I think it's what we need to do. So,
Thank you. Any further discussion? So we will put the motion to a vote to approve the capital improvement plan as amended this evening. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0-0. And the student rep's opinion.
In favor.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good work, everyone. That will now take us one step forward, one step back. That will take us to item number 5 on tonight's agenda, August Academy Focus and Outcome. I will turn the microphone over to Dr. Mark McLaughlin, who is going to introduce our guests and the topic for us. Thank you, Dr. McLaughlin.
Thank you. So happy to have tonight John Fabrizio, the Director of Special Services, Nancy Rose, the Director of Library Technology, Media, Information, Director of all kinds of things, and Mark Merrifield, Tech Specialist at Merrimack High School. I'm going to say a lot more about these three in just a couple of minutes. The reason that they're here tonight really has less to do with the roles for which they come to work every day and more as a partnership with me in planning our August Academy this year. So what I'll start by doing is thanking the board for the opportunity that it's given us for the last few years to have an August Academy front-loaded at the beginning of the year. As with anything, there are pluses and minuses, and clearly a minus to having that is that there aren't opportunities throughout the course of the year to sort of meet periodically and get updated on the progress of things as we find them. The plus side to it, in our opinion, far outweighs the downside, and that is that for the first time in years since we've started August Academy, we've really had the opportunity to focus our energies. Single days have a value, but the value is limited because you have people for a number of hours and you have a hard time really digging deep. And we have appreciated over the last few years the opportunity to dig deep. And so what we dug deep on this year is something that borders on more philosophical than we have in years past. In years past, I've come to the board and I've talked about areas of improvement in our district curriculum and instruction around that are needed, that have been pointed out in a number of data points, not just NECAP, but NECAP and others. involving areas of inquiry, analysis. And I've periodically come to you and I've said that that's an area that our students continue to need to be supported. And so that spurred a conversation where we began to think, is it important to not necessarily just have a, kind of a superficial touch on the question of inquiry? We really thought we need to change the dynamic in our district around that very central issue. So we really decided that we were going to go big and that we were really going to focus on a dynamic shift in the Merrimack School District around the notion of inquiry. So we started a campaign called Ask Why First. And it's really a simple idea, which is that students can't just, and I think I've said this to the board many times, students can't just know things. They have to understand why things are the way they are, why grammar works the way it does, what is the value, why computation matters, why social studies and learning history matters to them. It's one thing to know how long a river is. It's another thing to know how economies build up along rivers. That's a paradigm shift, if I can use a cliche, that we really need to continue to pursue. So that's what we tried to do. In addition to that, though, we realized that for all the years since we became a district in need of improvement, we have been about transformational work in Merrimack. We have transformed the way we do literacy instruction at the elementary grades. We've transformed the way we think about standards in our whole district. We have converted to competencies and competency-based grading at the high school, and that's just on the very, very surface. I don't need, if I did, it would be a lot longer meeting than we have for tonight. So what we wanted to do is to celebrate the accomplishments of the last 10 years and then to talk about a leverage point. If we have accomplished these things, these goals, these tasks, and really transformed so much of our instruction, we want to be able to put it into context for our teachers to understand why it is that it's now the right time to take all that success and to think in terms of how do we move our district forward. And so we tried to figure out a August Academy that could both leverage the past, celebrate what we've done, and recognize the work that needs to lie ahead, and we've encompassed that in the focus on inquiry. It was the product of a lot of reflective conversations about how we can enhance students' problem-solving skills, their analysis. It was a product of a lot of conversations about staying current with topics and trends in education to maintain relevance. Nancy Rose and I were at a conference in April where the keynote speaker at the conference called Future Ready Summit described how K-12 is not, as an institution, is not a fait accompli, that there are lots of alternatives, and we have to stay relevant. We have to keep evolving. We have to keep trying new things. We have to embrace change, not for change's sake, but we have to embrace new ways of thinking and doing things. And so we took that as a challenge to say, okay, well, what might we do differently? And one of the things that we thought we really should do differently is put the central focus of education, which is understanding what it is you're learning, inquiry, and getting students in that mindset. It was also the organization of August Academy was also around a recognition that technology is a resource to be used as an answer to a problem rather than as a tool to be used for its own sake. I give tremendous credit to Nancy Rose for helping us all think that way, that we don't use purchase and use technology because it's the shiny object and it's the coolest thing. Sometimes a very low-tech answer is the answer to a problem, but we use it and we implement it in response to a problem we can identify and name, and then we'll be, and the board has been wonderfully supportive of providing the resources, but there has to be a reason to use them. It was also organized around a recognition of the imperative to enhance curriculum integration and instruction and to increase student ownership of their work. The difference between a student being given an assignment and just going through the motions and checking it off versus wanting to complete an assignment because they understand its value to them and they understand its relationship to their future learning. So a couple of guiding philosophies that supported our August Academy preparation was the notion of desirable difficulties. It's a fascinating subject. I can talk to you more about it if you'd like, but the basic idea is this. Sometimes we can make things so easy for our learner that there are no hurdles to overcome. And so if you have no traction by having everything laid out, all the variables in a math problem are right there, and you just plug in a number, then there might be a knowing but not an understanding. And so the nature of a desirable difficulty is just that level of difficulty that causes you to have a little challenge to go, not sure I totally understand this, but enough of an interest to pursue it. So we had a notion of a desirable difficulty for our teachers as a premise for August Academy, and then to support that idea of a desirable difficulty for our students as well. Another philosophy that guided us came from a book by a man named Warren Berger, who wrote a book called A More Beautiful Question. And the idea there is that as an educator, if you can think of a way to frame a challenge or a problem in a way that causes the student to be challenged by a question, not just who discovered America or what was Columbus's country of origin, but what were the reasons that Columbus set sail, and what were the gains and the losses as a result of that. To flip a question, Berger calls this a more beautiful question, and therefore a more beautiful question provides a more beautiful understanding. And then the third thing was the notion of mindset, and this was connected to our leadership retreat. It's a book by a woman named Carol Dweck, and our leaders read that at our leadership retreat this summer, and the idea there is that it's very important to acknowledge that whatever subject we enter into, we have a viewpoint, we have a perspective, and that's fine, but if the perspective clouds our ability to think of a different way, then maybe we should name that thing and say, I guess I'm looking at it this way, but that's a process, and so we have to get our teachers to think that same way too. So our leadership really got into this question of mindset, changing mindsets, fixed mindsets, growth mindsets, and that filtered into our work at August Academy. I'm going to ask Nancy and John to speak in more detail about what we did on those days, but I think I can't miss the opportunity to say a special thanks to them. It's a big deal to try to pull off an August Academy for an entire system for 3 days, and it literally can't be done alone. And it's really hard to pull it off with even 3 people, but it's a credit to John and Nancy for the outstanding forward-thinking work that they did in addition to all the work that they do every day as being partners with me in developing this. And so I just have to thank them publicly for all the work they did. And I will also take a moment later to talk very specifically about Mr. Merrifield, who's here for a very specific reason, and that'll come in a few minutes. So I turn it over to Nancy, I think.
Sorry. I made a little slideshow. It's mostly just photos, and it was a hindsight, I think, to document our 3 days. So they're very candid. And I'm not really going to talk through this. This is just going to run. So I'll just start that. There's no music or anything like that. So the structure of the academy was broken into 3 days, and the first day was the overview keynote offered by Steve Garton, and then he also led the entire group, which was all of the educators and all of the paraprofessionals together in one room down at the Nashua Radisson through some self-reflective activities about the topics that Mark just talked about, like mindset, desirable difficulty, inquiry, integrating, contextualizing learning. So then day 2 was looked at as kind of a hands-on opportunity to take the first day's big ideas and turn it into sort of a more tactical or tangible opportunity to experience what we were talking about. So some of the questions that were put to them that day was the power of inquiry and teaching within a context. They were asking students to know why they're learning something, back to Mark's point. They were also being encouraged to identify big ideas. So if you, to Mark's point about the rivers, if they were talking about rivers, why do you learn about rivers? What's the significance of that? And what are the different, if you know about one, what do you know about all? And the integration of instruction provides a lot more opportunities to see connections, to find ways to apply the skills and the lessons learned, and to identify problem-solving skills and the ability to take what you learned in one area and apply it in another area. Because this is a big area of concern for us is students learn math in math class, but they may go to science class and completely lose touch with the math because maybe different vocabulary was used or it wasn't ever put into a context. And I pick on math a lot because math was a weak point for me in high school. So if you hear that, that's my weakness. So there was one, it was kind of a complicated schedule, but people rotated through 3 90-minute sessions. They were in cohorts of 40 that were randomly assigned, so they didn't get to group with their peers or their colleagues or their friends. They were just grouped. And they went through an inquiry session, then we called it finding an instance of, or integrating standards. So it was getting more to, when you teach something specific, it is an instance of a bigger idea, and you can use that as a way to integrate across the standards and the skill areas. And then there was, we called it Your Turn to Learn, and there were 3 different sessions, and so the groups of 40 rotated through one of the 3 sessions. It's worth noting that we only had one outside presenter. We had Sue Ballard, who is a retired library and technology director from Londonderry. She'd been the former president of the American Association of School Librarians, the national organization. She taught one of the inquiry sessions or facilitated. Otherwise, we had educators from the district doing the facilitation, and we gave them talking points, ideas that we wanted conveyed, some materials, and set them loose. And the facilitators really should be called out too, and Mark was one of them. They really hit it out of the park. They took a big chance. They put themselves in front of their peers and were phenomenal. They really, really phenomenal. The 3 hands-on sessions I think that might be worth talking a little bit about were programming with the dash and dot robots, which as you go through the pictures, the ones where they're on the floor are the dash and dot programming pictures. And they worked in groups, and they learned the basics of programming using a block programming like Scratch, which I talked about last year with the Hour of Code programming. They then ran their programs through the robots and got to test it out. They figured out how they did. They went back, revised, retried, and then as they built their comfort level, they moved on and did other challenges. And then with each of these sessions, the facilitators will then walk them through some discussion about, this is a learning experience for the educator, but how could you imagine using this? What are some of the standards that you may have unwittingly just covered? You know, maybe you didn't realize that you were covering science and physics when you were doing programming, but you were. So they helped them think very broadly about the activity. Another session was using Makey-Makeys, which are little circuits that you can override the inputs on your computer. So the arrow keys, enter, space bar, and anything that conducts electricity can become an input. So you learn about conductivity, you learn about basic programming. Those are the Makey-Makeys. They did music with them. They learned a little bit about connecting people together. That's the standards picture. And then they were looking at how they could take the lesson that they were working on and then extend that, so use their imagination. So there were teachers that had never seen this before that were suddenly saying, oh, well, we could all hold hands and we would conduct electricity and we could make ourselves a really giant instrument, which they didn't go into the day anticipating that they were going to be doing things like that. So it was very big picture thinking, but then also applied. Then the last one was the world in your hands, which this was an interesting one because it wasn't technical. They were given materials. When they got into the room, there were materials on the table, and then they were presented with different scenarios that they had to respond to and then make some kind of a geographical representation of those scenarios. And some of the scenarios, examples were like oil was never discovered as a refinable resource. What does that do to the geography or to the maps to where populations center. The Industrial Revolution occurred in Central Africa. The Axis powers won World War II. So the discussions that came from these were unbelievable. And the people that were able to pull from their expertise, whether they were high school social studies teachers or in one case a physics teacher was sharing her understanding of how energy is produced, and maybe it wouldn't be such a huge difference if we didn't ever have oil because we would have gone nuclear sooner. It was just the level of dialogue, the level of questioning of each other, the ability for everybody to bring something to the table, recognition of each other and the roles that they play and the populations that they work with, the respect across the district. It was uncanny what people shared about the experience. So when we put the sessions together, we had some deliberate thoughts. We made it so that because of the scheduling, we had to offer them to people in different order. So everybody went through them, and the idea was that the completion of the third would kind of present a whole set of learning or kind of an experience. And as we heard from people, that did seem to be true. Like once they got through the third one, they're kind of like, oh, this all fits together. We did encourage them to play and have fun and to work with these different activities for their own learning, but also to think about what this might mean in their classroom and how much they could get done this way. What would it feel like to really explore like fears, concerns, questions, possibilities, potential? And then they were also to view this academy as moving forward, or permission to move forward, as Mark said, to work on the infrastructure of skills that they've been building for the last 6 to 10 years and use that to then move forward with a standards-based instruction, but in a way that allows the child to start from their interest, to find intrinsic motivation, to ask the questions that are of interest to them, and to facilitate that learning process as opposed to stand and deliver content that you're then asked to regurgitate. Some unexpected outcomes, I think, and I don't want to steal John's thunder, but they're mine. The educators expressed a really high regard and respect for each other at all the grade levels, which putting all of the pre-K through 12 plus para-educators together was a risk, but I think it was extremely well received. They liked working with each other and what every different level brought. They were able to kind of look at, wow, that makes a lot of sense, and some aspects of what you do would maybe help me at my level. They asked for opportunities to work with each other in this way, again, ongoing. They were looking for ways to continue to collaborate throughout the year. They talked about things like visiting classrooms, swapping classrooms, partnering on projects between the grade levels and between the schools. And they found connections from different sessions that were really innovative in ways that we had no anticipation of. So they were talking about using the Dash and Dot robots maybe to teach foreign language or to teach behavioral or social modeling for the lower level students that maybe are not as verbally oriented. They talked about using the makey-makeys in all different kinds of ways for presenting knowledge or to have students be able to use them as part of their presentation repertoire. And then the World in Your Hands, the geography one, they liked it's kind of hard to say what they liked. They liked it, and they liked that it was open. They liked that it took something that they knew and turned it on its head and gave them an opportunity to use background knowledge and put it in a twist and to apply learning in a completely unexpected way. So they, in that one, I'm actually taking some courses in education right now, and one of the things that I was just learning about is called a perception-action natural learning cycle, so where you perceive something and respond to it, and then you learn about that, and you use that deliberately to move forward, and it's just a learning process. But by going through those prompts and working with each other in groups and playing off of each other, they all grew. Each member of each group was able to move themselves forward, get into areas that they didn't know, challenge themselves in ways that they wouldn't have if they'd have been reading a text and responding to what they read. So that was mine.
Thank you. You will see some common themes between what Nancy said and what I said and Mark. I think that I'm going to talk a little bit about our collaboration and some of the connections we made and kind of some takeaways we had from the whole entire experience. I think when we set out, we said we wanted to put 530 educators in a room together. And when you start that conversation, you say, okay, how are we going to do this and make sure that we're engaged, it's productive, and we move forward as a group, and we set some common goals and standards, but we also allow for time not to control too much. And how do we do that in a manner that will help us? So we began by this, right down to the seating when we began. We said, it's going to be like going to a wedding. We're going to pair you with somebody you know, and you get to walk in the door together and sit at a table of unknowns. And then throughout the time there, it was amazing for us all to watch. And we sat back and we did watch. The leadership team sat to the back and watched a little bit of this happening. And in watching, watched the teams develop and watched them grow together and watched them share common interests. And when you walked around, you heard things like, oh, I understand inquiry. It's a lot what we do in kindergarten. It's a lot what we do in preschool. We do a lot of time. We do centers and stations, and we have a common theme, and we move forward. And to look at some of the high school people who are more specialized in their area, think about that. And then think about, oh, we're starting that process a little bit at the high school, some of our integrated classes. I see that connection. And the conversation kept on snowballing from there. And as you watched what went on when they were amazingly attentive to Steve Garton as he was presenting and what he was presenting to them. And then he would have a lot of sessions where turn and talk and how does this apply to you. And you always know when people are engaged in a good presenter because when the presenter tries to start back up again, they're not ready. And they weren't ready to their conversation. And I think we saw a lot of that through the first day, a lot of that. I want more. I want to ask more questions of my partners. I want to talk to my partners more next to me. And that went on. I think that we watched a lot of times special educators, para-educators, people from different roles and different levels being able to talk about how they connect kids to learning and how they make it relevant and how they give it purpose. And listen and watching that paired with someone from a high school math class or high school English class was interesting to watch the difference in how they related to kids in very different ways and brought some of those pieces together. There was, and then on the second day, Nancy talked about the random groupings. We decided to reshuffle, and it was by alphabet. There was no other big thought on that. Put them together, A through C, A through A B go here, A through A G go there, and group them together. And to watch them in the hallways and in a very untraditional, you saw some pictures in tables, and what you watched with those tables, they were talking to each other. They were engaged. They were continually posed with new questions, new problems, and more time to collaborate. Things from using a lot of technology such as Dash and Dot to simple paper pencil tasks that were involved in the maps, and that went on throughout the entire second day. Then on the second day also, the paraeducators separated from the group, and they went in to do some work around their role in a multi-tiered system. How do they support all kids, even beyond special ed kids, and then helping our children with identified needs integrate with other kids? And we spent a lot of time doing that piece and with other students. And then we did a lot of reflection on the third day about what worked in our groups, what was challenging, what new questions did we have together. And that all came out in the third day, and we did a lot of work on that. And then some more collaborative work together as groups, and you saw some pictures of them building the little straw structures, and that was a very interesting activity for us all to do. Spaghetti structures. So what are some takeaways that we had from this? The Merrimack educators are all part of a very big family and a very big team, and I think we saw that, and it was nice to see that. That's the first thing. We've done some amazing things over the past 10 years in this district. It's not broken. It's really solid in the work that we've done. What this workshop and these 3 days let us do is make some connections to things that we didn't know connected. We brought some standards together along with, okay, we can do the standards and we can teach multiple standards in one lesson. We can teach multiple competencies in one lesson. Okay, we get this now. We can pair with our partner across the way and even teach more competencies together. We can pair and learn from our elementary teachers to understand what they've already taught. And like Nancy said earlier, they were looking and asking by the end of this time, how can we meet more? What other opportunities do we have? So we'll move forward and do that. And some of the things that we did learn, it's okay to fail forward. When you fail, You're trying. You're trying something different. That desirable difficulty. That time to, well, it didn't go as well as I thought, but guess what? We had some fun doing it. We learned something. There were some takeaways from that were positive. And then not being afraid to ask why and question why we're doing what we're doing and why lends you to a much deeper understanding. So that's all. Mark.
That's excellent. Thank you both. Before I introduce Mark and let you know why he's here, I just say a couple of things that occurs to me. We've referenced Steve Garten, and I don't think you know who Steve is. So Nancy and I went to the Future Ready Summit in Providence, Rhode Island in April. That's a partnership between Common Sense Education and the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education, and it's a national effort to get school districts to just think about their practice and think about ways that they can innovate. And Steve Garten was the keynote, and through a very unusual occurrence, Steve came to Nancy and I, and we chatted, and we really struck up a pretty fast relationship, and started to talk to him about things that this is in April, so what we were kind of forecasting for August, and he got on board quickly. This is a national guy with reach everywhere who decided that he liked what we were proposing enough that he'd come. So he came and spent 3 days with us. Keynote on the first day, really led the third day, and then in the middle oversaw the work. So that's the independent work. That's one thing. The notion of failing forward, John's talked about, and I just want to say something quick about that. Everything that we tried to have teachers experience, we're trying to have students experience. So we're trying to, in order to learn, you have to feel free enough to say, okay, this might not totally work, but I'm not going to give up, because we all know that you learn as much from the things that didn't work as you do from the things that do. And so we have to make sure that teachers feel comfortable about that. Not everything they do is going to be perfect. And if they feel like that's what they need to do, then there will be no innovation. So we have to try to create a culture where that's okay. So we've termed that failing forward. The other thing that I just want to say is I don't mean to suggest that every teacher leaving had this wonderful aha moment. I'm sure that many people left and said, what in heck was that? Because it was a very unusual 3 days. And that's fine if they did. What we were trying to accomplish is to try to really get people to think a little differently about their practice. And sometimes that causes people to say, well, I'm not sure if that's what different looks like. I'm not sure I'm there. That's okay. And I expect it, and I embrace it. We don't run from it, but it's a conversation point. So we do think overall it went very well, and we did achieve what we had for our goals. But I don't mean to suggest to you that everybody left totally buying it. But we've established a conversation. We are going to start to say to our teachers more, not just what did your student learn today, but what do they understand today? That's a question that we can ask now because of this. So, and related. So I just wanted to make those points. Now, the reason that Mark Merrifield is here is because in addition to the fact that he was one of the facilitators that Nancy's quite right to point out need their own standing ovation, because to ask a teacher in district to provide instruction to colleagues, we had kindergarten people paired, a kindergarten teacher, for instance, paired with a high school science teacher to run a session with educators throughout the day. That's an unusual pairing, and you can imagine that might have been a scary thing, but they embraced the opportunity to do that. And so Mark was one of those people, and at some point this summer, we decided that we wanted to try to have a frame for our 3 days. And so John and Nancy and I were thinking a lot about, well, how could we set the stage for it? And over time, we thought, well, if there were some way that we could have some sort of PowerPoint, and as I think about it now, I mean, it's just like, that would have been so bad. So, but anyway, so thinking, and who could help us? Well, Mark Merrifield is a very talented guy. So we asked Mark, we kind of proposed to him what we were hoping to do, and we said that we'd like some kind of video or some sort of short film that we kind of, if we could possibly pull it off. So we opened and closed with the film that Mark put together, which I'd like to show you tonight, because I think it helps to capture both how we started August Academy and then having gone through the 3 days. And then we watched it again, hoping that people saw that a little differently after the experience of 3 days. So just as one of the ways that we've tried to thank Mark, he received the first ever August Academy Award for filmmaking. And we were able to give him a little statue that Nancy's husband made for him of an alien, Mark, I think, which is one of your favorite. You know?
It was Gort from when the day the Earth stood still.
There we go.
Yeah.
So the August Academy Award for filmmaking recipient here with us tonight. The Augie. There we go. There we go. But really, when Mark has just proven over the years to be so good at when you ask for something you think you might not be able to do, and then he just is able to do it. And so it's quite special. So I'd like to just thank Mark personally and have the opportunity for the board to see it and then give Mark a chance for a second after.
It was 2005, a decade ago, 10 years. So much happens in 10 years. So much happened in 2005 alone. Christmas was on a Sunday, Halloween was on a Monday, and, well, Thanksgiving was on a Thursday. Things seemed to be going quite well until in the spring of 2005, the Merrimack School District was named a district in need of improvement. It was a difficult time, but here is where a journey began, a journey of discovery and positive evolution that continues to this day. So many people and initiatives were involved. How many people do you remember? That good work began when our district was challenged to ask itself, are we as good as we can be? And if not, how can we evolve to become even better facilitators of learning? And so, for the last 10 years, we've been learning and doing, developing and growing. But all the effort has never been just about the individual parts, whether it be RTI, data-driven decision-making, standards-based instruction, or curriculum revision. Every important skill or strategy or pedagogical enhancement our educators have learned to do, and every important initiative our district has undertaken since we were challenged by the Denny designation 10 years ago, has always been about more than the thing itself. All of it has been about creating an infrastructure to more effectively and more consistently respond to the educational needs of our students as those needs change over time. And so, in order to ensure that the whole of all these efforts remains greater than the sum of its parts, our district is choosing to focus less right now on all those parts and to focus more instead on the whole of what we do and why we do it.
Inquiry. Ask why first. What does a truly inquiry-based classroom look like? What do our students gain in such an environment? How might we more intentionally model an inquiry mindset for our students? Why would we want to do that? What could be the gain? What challenges might we, as educators, face by engaging more deeply in such a learning environment? Is it safe to do so? What is the vision for teaching and learning in the Merrimack School District? How do all the parts of all our efforts over all these years relate to the whole of what students in Merrimack should know and be able to do?
These are the questions we'll begin to explore during this year's Academy. And more importantly, these are the questions we'll be encouraging each other to ask from now on. Because the fact is this, we don't just want our students to know, we want them to understand. We don't just want them to do, we want them to make. We don't just want them to learn, we want them to wonder. Why? Because wonder is the beginning of wisdom. Let's get started.
So I think you can see why Mr. Merrifield won the Augie. So Chairman Ortega just asked, who's that voice? So here's why things are so funny. So I said to Mark, I don't want to be the narrator. It's just too much of me. You, though, Mark, have a very nice voice. So maybe you want to be the one. And then Mark said, go ahead.
Well, I said I do have a niece out in Tulsa, and she is a professional voiceover artist. So I asked her if she'd be willing to do that, and we had talked about maybe having a child's voice in there at some point, and she enlisted her daughter. And I sent the narrative out to Tulsa, and about, believe it or not, there was about a half-hour turnaround on that. So, yeah.
Unbelievable. So just really want to call out Mark particularly for, as he always does, take on a challenge and just really go with it. So that was how we started, and then after 3 days, that's how we ended. And so that was our August Academy for this year. And I think it has started a great conversation that we have every intention of pursuing well into our future.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from the board? Vice Chair Barnes.
I'm just going to play off your theme of inquiry, and I know that every year we'll go back to an old term, NECAP, which we're so over, but that was always the area where we talked about the biggest area for growth and improvement. Did that inspire this, and where could you see that if impacting that area of testing and I think just performance?
Yeah. Yes. So yes, it absolutely did. I was acutely aware, have been, that when I come before the board and we talk about the areas in NECAP that are not our strength, it's always that. And so we had a choice. I mean, either we could just continue to have workshops on, how to teach analysis for an hour and, whatever, or we could really go big and we could try to have this become a district focus that's really inherent in what we do and how we operate, which is a very different thing than just covering the problem, but really trying to get underneath the problem. So that was a big motivator for why we kind of went big with this, because I hope, I don't assume that this is going to change overnight, but we've made, I think, good strides, and I'm hoping that after this and after the conversations that this will unleash in the district about how to do this differently. What does it mean? One of the things that Steve said that people do a lot, every good intention, is they take a challenge like I need to teach inquiry, and what they'll end up doing is kind of doing the thing they've always done, but with some little switch, and then think so it'd be kind of like, I'll use PowerPoint instead of just talking to you. Well, really, I'm just giving you a message with a picture, but nothing substantial has changed. So really trying to challenge people to say, is the thing you're doing really inquiry, or is it just kind of dressed up? And so these are the kinds of things that we're really hoping to have be part of our conversation, as I say, well into the future. But it was very much driven by that experience we've had over time.
And I guess to that point, now that we are not having ECAP, we're having a different testing platform with Smarter Balanced. Is there a way that you'll be able to measure any type of impact August Academy, even though it's in September, but August Academy had on that area of instruction?
So if you're talking about an actual metric, I can't say that we have one in place right now. What I will say is that Smarter Balance, in my opinion, is an improvement over NECAP as an assessment platform, because everything about Smarter Balance is about application. It has everything to do with not just being able to check off a multiple choice, but to be able to show your work, to work through a process, to be able to have an outcome that you can explain and understand. And that is exactly what our August Academy was attempting to do. So, it's very hard to draw parallels. It's always been very hard. I do this differently in this outcome, because of the nature of learning. And, there are thousands of things that affect how a student can perform on anything. So it's hard to always draw right back to one event. But it's clearly intended to send a message to teachers that this is the kind of dialogue we want to have. This is the kind of instruction we want to continue to support. And we think inevitably it's going to have an outcome in the student's ability to more deeply engage in the problems that they're going to be asked to do, not just on Smarter Balance, because that's just a data point, but on everything else that they do. That's our intention.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Powell.
So I stumbled across the August Academy on day 2. I actually was looking for Mark and was told that he was down at the Nashua Radisson. Is it Radisson now? Radisson. Yeah, thank you. And I was on my way south, and I said, I'll just swing by real quick, catch him, ask him the question I have to ask him, and be on my way. 3 hours later, I left the property because I got sucked in. And I have to share what my impressions were as an outsider, not being part of the targeted group or the presenters. When I walked in, I could literally feel that there was an energy level. Now, part of that may have been because in the big room there were all the retirees from BAE, and then all this noise was coming from down the hall from Merrimack. So that might have had something to do with it. But I noticed as I walked further and further down the hallway, the energy level increased, and it just seemed to get more intense. There was definitely a high level of engagement that was very noticeable. And to speak to your point, walls were definitely coming down. I could see interaction between grade levels that just would not have happened without something like this. And I think if nothing else comes from what you did these 3 days, that piece is huge. Yes, we consider ourselves a family, as you said, but it really showed that everybody came together. We're more like first cousins now instead of third and fourth cousins. Everybody was able to talk to each other and not feel awkward about it. You had already mentioned that all the presenters were almost 100% homegrown. To me, that was incredible. In fact, one of the presenters, if I'm not mistaken, this is he's coming into his second year of teaching in the district. And, you know, if I'm brand new, relatively brand new, and I'm expected to get up in front of my peers and talk, it would be nerve-wracking. And I think that he did an incredible job. And it was obviously amongst the group of coordinators that I was able to talk to, there was definitely a sense of pride. John, you almost literally grabbed me and dragged me into every room to show me what was going on. Nancy wouldn't let me say 2 words. She kept interrupting every time I said something. And Mark was just beaming from ear to ear with, everything that was going on. And I was really fortunate that I happened upon it and was able to spend the time there. And I thank you all for indulging me and showing me what great work you were doing, and I applaud you for it. And next year, if you have the same type of setup, I would encourage everyone to try and attend at least one day, just to see what's happening. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Ms. Guagliumi.
And Davis was very excited about it. He actually reached out to me almost immediately and was like, I think you were still there. Yeah. And you were really excited about it. And, I mean, thank you so much, for the work that you put into this, because this is just a huge effort with so many moving parts and so much to organize. It's just having had to do things like this, organize certain things that pale in comparison to this type of an event and make it meaningful, and to really get that enthusiasm and excitement and really go blow it out of the clouds with, the things like the videos and such, to really just make that impact and to prove the points is really incredible. So great job. And I think even down to the seating, even at my own wedding, I actually switched the seating around. So I had people that came together that didn't sit. They sat at the same table, but I staggered them to force those conversations. And I think that, that's really, because I had gone to a wedding where somebody had done that. And I think that to try to even promote the ability to create the relationships in the district that way, someone might end up with a new friend, new colleague, and some safety, a safety place to run an idea by, and to be able to share information the same kind of way that when we have people that are going to Southern New Hampshire University, that they can find other relationships and colleagues within the industry is really great. And then to be able to build that right into our own district is still, an amazing, valuable outcome. And it just happens to be through that, being able to share. So thank you all. It's really impressive. I know that it's really popular. We've heard tremendous feedback in the prior year. And then I definitely want to be able to swing by and check it out next year. But congratulations. You have a lot to be proud of.
Thank you. Actually, I think the superintendent had a point to make.
Well, I was just going to say it's important for me to call out Mark as well. Nancy and John and Mark know how important I feel their efforts were toward this. Mark is the one who really had the idea for it, and I said it was like planting a seed because it was nurtured at the leadership table over a period of time and talked about. The fact of the matter is, having been in the district so very long, we have never been 530 strong. In fact, there is no place in the district that we could have 530 of us convene. So the fact of being all together in this huge ballroom and realize at a moment in time every single adult who touches a child relative to learning was assembled all at once for all the messages of the day and working with one another is a very powerful notion. And I think you walk away from it knowing it was a time and place, probably not to be repeated again. Even if you tried, it wouldn't be exactly that way. What I will tell you is 18 days hence, we are hearing about what I call the ripple out. So it is but the beginning. When Shannon talks in terms of, did this come from assessment? Sure, because we're looking at the assessments all the time, trying to figure out how we can be better. This isn't just going to be about an assessment and an outcome. This is going to be about a way of being. And I dare say, when we have people come before you over time, you will see the evidence of it. It will make itself known to you just based on what I'm hearing and seeing. And that's all I'm doing, is I'm watching and listening, and I'm seeing it 18 days hence. So, pretty powerful.
Mr. Schneider had his hand up, and then I'll go to you, Ms. Williams.
Just wait.
Trying to be fair.
Anybody, I think it's great to see the district together like this as a group, because we don't often hear about all the buildings together, all the administrators and everybody together. Those of us that have worked in industry for way too long, we see this as team building exercises, and it doesn't work as well if everybody's in the same building all the time, because you're not really building a team. But a good equation for people out there that don't work in education, when you've got a group that's geographically dispersed and you know everybody because you talk to them and stuff like that, but you never really work with them until you sit next to them. Some people, you don't know their face. You hear their voice, but you've never seen their face before. And being able to do this team-building activities where it's applicable to the kind of things you want to do is completely invaluable. So I really love to see this sort of industry concept into the environment. I will say there's something really interesting about the place that you were, because having worked down in that area for decades, I've probably been 100 times into that building for different sorts of training, and the fact you've got ballrooms and then enough individual rooms to be the breakouts and then go to a ballroom there is amazing. So I mean, if you do this in the future, finding a place that could duplicate that, I think, is the key, because it allows you to accommodate the size of what you are and things like that. So I'd love to. I'm glad to see this happen. I'm not sure if it's feasible to replicate every year, but when you have the opportunity to, I think it's great. So,
thank you, Ms. Gualiumi.
And then it was just one other point I wanted to make, which was about, one thing that I really enjoy hearing is being able to take the expertise within the district and share it and propagate it. And I know as a district we spend money even for training, and to be able to, even Nancy, you referenced your learning outside of your job, right back here, and to be able to share that information with others is another thing that makes me very, very pleased.
That's great. Any other comments? I would echo the thanks and the congratulations of my colleagues here at the table. One thing that was not noted explicitly, but I am quite pleased to see, is that we moved forward on tonight's consent agenda the new district logic model. And what's wonderful to see is that the August Academy is focused on some major areas within our new logic model. So even though it wasn't formally ratified, we're moving forward with that as our vision, which is lifelong student learners, student ownership, and inquiry-based learning. I think, the comments that have been made about the team-building aspect of this, I think those would probably be listed as secondary objectives of the academy, where inquiry-based learning and really flipping things around and finding a new approach for the classroom and getting comfortable with discomfort is really what we were driving at. The fact that we also were able to foster collaboration, communication across boundaries, and establish relationships that didn't exist, that's the gravy, I guess, on top. I think one of the things, now that the August Academy is, no longer a concept but a reality and something that we've adopted, I think it might be helpful, and I'll throw it out as a suggestion, to have a formal feedback loop from the educators who participate, a standard survey to understand what their perceptions were. To Dr. McLaughlin's point, perhaps some people got it, perhaps some didn't, but certainly the feedback is helpful in fine-tuning and preparing for future years' academy. So I'll give you that as something to consider moving forward. I couldn't get over the professional quality of that movie. Working in a small startup software company that's trying to put material out and get our company noticed, I'm finding without a lot of money, it's hard to make a video of that caliber, quality, and narration. That's a professional quality movie that you created, Mr. Merrifield. So congratulations to you. Thank you to all of you for the hard work. It is much appreciated by this board. Thank you, everyone. And that will now take us, now we're skipping forward to item number 7, board members' responses regarding 2016-2017 budget priorities. As discussed at our last meeting, as part of our annual budget process, we have taken up a process of sharing individual thoughts and direction for what each board member is looking for in terms of the budget process as a means of providing administration some direction for the coming year's budget formulation. Each of our individual voices are, I think, helpful and important. The superintendent has expressed in the past how valuable it is to hear our individual voices. Over the next 2 weeks before our next meeting, I will take the common themes that come from the 5 of our voices and craft a message from the board to administration as an official direction for the budget. And so in no particular order, normally we'd start at one end and move to the next. So just by a show of hands, whoever wants to go can share their message and we'll move forward. So Vice Chair Barnes.
I typed mine up, so I'll give it to you when I'm done. I did this, and honestly, the way I would look at it for the rest of you is, even if I say it, I think the more of us that say the same thing, it shows that the cognitive importance of the item. So I'll go verbatim, so I don't miss anything. So the first thing is we cannot present a budget to our voters that will result in a spike in the tax rate. Considering the goals of the district, we must look at how investment in initiatives will result in quantifiable improvement in the quality of education and performance of students. Such initiatives should have associated data we can examine. This would include projected results in subsequent years to the actual results. We must look at the facilities of the district and maintain them to meet safety standards and to prevent larger costs that result from neglect. We must continue to invest in technology on a consistent basis so that we do not cause a need to overhaul large amounts of technology due to platform relevance, machine failure, etc. We must look at the financial impacts the new logic model presents and fund accordingly to support the mission of the district. Any funding specific to this effort should be noted in our budget books. We must have information on the items that made the cut list and also the consequences of the cuts on that cut list. In the budgeting process, any cuts we make in working sessions should also have information on the consequences of these cuts prior to the vote to accept the budget. We must commit to the growth of co-curricular funding and must get information on the goals of the funds in our budget books. We will also need historical funding from prior budgets so we can look at the funding trends. We must also receive information on co-curricular programs that are unfunded and partially funded and what funds were needed for these groups to achieve their goals. We will want to see funding of sports programs and in addition want to see the financial contributions of the booster programs and team fundraisers toward the program so that we can see a comparative of funding between sports and co-curriculars, being mindful that sports programs do not have the travel expectations of co-curricular teams. We want to look at student-teacher ratios for students at all levels. I'm particularly interested in the high school level in response to the shift of position from math to social studies, which is so different in area because of supply and demand, that was presented to the board over the summer. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Vice Chair Marnes. Anyone else? Mr. Powell.
So I don't have mine typed up. I apologize. I'll get it to you afterwards. Continuing theme that I think we say every year is we need to have the data to make data-driven decisions. Everything, as far as I'm concerned, needs to show a value to the end user, i.e. the student. How, if you're asking for something new, how is this going to benefit the student? If you're wanting to eliminate something, what are going to be the consequences, if you will? And finally, I'd like to take a hard look at food service. It's an area where, yes, we all understand it is self-funding to an extent, but I would like to really dive into what effect would it be if we chose to go down the route of not accepting federal funding. I know that there are a couple districts that did that late this year or mid-year, so I'd like to get that information if all possible, and then see how Merrimack would be able to use that in moving forward.
Thank you. Any other volunteers? Mr. Schneider, we seem to have picked a mode.
Well, we're going down the road, so might as well. Now, the interesting part is I typed mine up, but I didn't print it out, so I'm reading from my phone here. So, he's already got it in his inbox.
You're a New World
He
guy.
didn't look right. New World guy. Anyway, so I'll just read it. It's not too long. My budget message to the Merrimack School Administration for the 16-17 school year budget process includes overall to come up with a budget that, aside from the incremental urgent CIP items and possible added costs passed down to us from the state, tries to be as consistent in terms of cost as possible with last year's operating budget. Now, this is kind of interesting because we just did this. To work cooperatively with the school board on helping come up with a phased-in CIP for this year and beyond that balances needs versus wants. But I also put a note in here. We probably have done this already by the time I read this, so forget that part. To carefully look at the
I haven't read my email yet, so if you...
Right, but whatever.
I'm enjoying the
You're
ride.
getting this live, so it is what it is, right? Nothing different from me. To carefully look at staffing levels alongside each building's population to ensure we have the adequate balance of staffing and population while providing the delivery of subject matter that is expected by the population of each school within the district. For example, this includes but not limited to detailed information about the electives at the high school level, balancing student expectations and the staff expertise therein. To carefully look at spending programs such as ongoing furniture programs, textbook replacement, incremental purchase of specialized items such as cameras, microscopes, etc., and see what could be spread or deferred to future planning years, understanding the criticality of the budget this year. And finally, ensure that the infrastructure and associated funding is properly forecasted for programs that are either required, such as standardized testing, or supportive of curriculum evolution needs within the district schools and are clearly called out as such during the budgeting process.
Excellent. Thank you. Ms. Gualiumi?
I'll keep mine fairly simple because I think at the end of the day, watching the spike to the tax rate is really important, as well as, again, coming down to that basic being responsible in the education that we deliver to the children. I mean, there's always that balance. So I think, obviously being as prudent as we can, getting the most value from the choices that we can make while protecting, as far as making smart decisions, as far as, not maybe, for example, some of our building, our CIP stuff, that it's what do we need to do now so we don't have a bigger expense down the road, and some things like that. There's a couple things about last year's budgeting process that I really thought were helpful. I'd like to see them again this year, is basically, thinking ahead of kind of that tiered approach. When we start getting into the questioning and again, as we really analyze what our wants are versus our needs, I found it really helpful. I think, Shannon, I felt like maybe you requested that last year where we had the Marge, where administration came back with, if there were basically the tiers of cuts, if they were possible, and it kind of put them into priorities. And
It's been done quite a bit.
Okay, well, it was my first year last year, at least on that part, but I didn't remember it from the year before quite like that. And
So it's Shannon's idea. That's
We'll
fine.
go with
We'll
it.
stick with that. We'll give
Okay.
credit to Shannon.
okay, no, I just didn't remember it the way that it was categorized that way. So, anyways, and if we've done it in the years prior, then I'd like to stick with that because I thought it was really helpful to kind of get that perspective, and I think it opened up some, again, the data-driven analysis. One thing that I would like to mention that made it a little difficult for me last year is some of the line items that were kind of grouped together. It made it difficult to know how much of the line item. I think there were a couple in the sports sections where I'd like to see those broken out a little more clearly, just to help me ask the right questions and to look at those a little bit more thoroughly. But anyways, obviously, you know, it's close to last year's budget as possible would be what I would want to see. But I also know that we really narrowed down that budget. We really kept it pretty tight. So it'll be interesting to see maybe how the first run of the budget comes out, knowing that and realizing that. But I would like to see it as close to last year's budget as possible. And thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guglielmi. I did not type anything up, and so I'm going to go like my friend at the end, totally off the cuff. But my ideas are, I hope, based on what I heard, fairly consistent with what my peers are saying. We have a lot to be proud of in the Merrimack School District, and watching the video that we just watched, I think, and hearing the discussion of the August Academy, I think reinforces that. Ahead of us, we have a large number of capital improvement projects, and we worked through that list tonight, and I think we've reached a reasonable balance. But that said, there's a tremendous amount of money in capital improvement projects, necessary or urgent, in the coming year. While I want as well to avoid a tax spike or any sort of budget increase, I won't support any change or reduction in the budget to accommodate those capital costs that's going to impact student education. So I think we need to be very clear when formulating the budget that, and we have in the past, when making some sort of a reduction due to declining enrollments, those sorts of adjustments make sense, and that's where the classroom ratios at all levels come into play, and making sure that we are right-sized for the education that we're providing. I agree with continuing to invest in technology. I was heartened that our continued support of the technology infrastructure in the capital improvement plan didn't move, wasn't even a question, that we are continuing on the path of improving technology. Obviously, we need to understand the impacts of any reductions in the budget, and as well, any increases, we should understand what data supports those increases and what our projected impacts will be. Like Vice Chair Barnes, and I know Mr. Powell has supported this as well, as has this board and other boards, look for continued increases and more data as it relates to co-curricular activities, non-athletic co-curriculars. I think that while I may not support fully funding them, I think having the financial picture of what we are spending as a district on co-curriculars, what individuals and boosters are spending on those co-curriculars, as well as athletics, what's being spent by the district and how much is being invested by the boosters, will give us a better idea of the parity situation in those regards. But in terms of next year's budget, I'm not sure what we can commit to or not commit to. I think it's really a matter of having the data so that we can understand. So in many respects, I think we, I don't think my job is going to be that difficult. I think that the board members have expressed a number of common themes. Hopefully hearing it in each of our individual voices is helpful. And as I mentioned, I will summarize over the next couple of weeks those common themes, and I'll share drafts so that when we come to the next meeting, we have a message that comes from the voice of the board. Thank you, everyone. And that now takes us to option number 8. Options for, I'm sorry? Oh, sorry, I was skipping ahead. It's my dyslexia. I didn't even know I was dyslexic. Apparently, I am. Agenda item number 8 is options for sharing and discussing curriculum information. Dr. Mark McLaughlin was nice enough at our last meeting to attempt to summarize and give us straw man options for how curriculum information might be shared. So I'll turn it over to Dr. McLaughlin, perhaps to summarize the memo he put in our document, and then we can take up discussion.
So I just would add to what I wrote in the memo by saying I hope the board understands I'm happy to do whatever it wishes to do and support whatever model it chooses. I fully recognize the importance of communication to the board and having the board be apprised in whatever way it wishes to be apprised of information as it relates to curriculum. Tonight's a good example of a sort of an update, providing information about how we're trying to go forward. And, we've got a model that's been in place. And we've also discussed that regardless, or the memo describes that regardless of which model, there will be an attempt to provide quarterly reports, or not an attempt, there will be quarterly reports to provide the board with updates. And I think we said at the last meeting some good dialogue too. I leave it in your hands, and I'm more than happy to provide whatever supports you need to accomplish your requirement of being informed.
Wonderful. So the process that seems to have worked for us as it relates to the capital improvement plan, we should probably follow with this, which is to entertain a motion regarding one of the two options and use that as the basis for discussion. So, Vice Chair Barnes, would you like to make a motion?
I move that the board take a no liaison model, which is option 2, to have the curriculum information disseminated to the board.
Is there a second? Made by Mr. Schneider. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I think I've been consistent and vocal on this. I really think the board as a whole benefits from regular comprehensive updates versus, 30-second email synopses. And as far as feedback, I think the board as a whole is available to provide feedback to any curriculum area throughout the year as they see fit. So I know that the curriculum areas meet monthly.
Yep.
And based on that, if coming out of their September meeting they have questions for us, we put it at the next, make that the top priority.
Mm-hmm.
If there's ever a question for our next agenda item for our next board meeting, and then we can vet any questions that they may have. So I think we still have an opportunity to give them the feedback that Andy was concerned might be lost by not having that structure, by just making that a top priority for any agenda item that may come up.
Great. Further discussion. Mr. Schneider.
So I realize I'm in the vast minority on this particular topic because I do see value in regular connectivity to the curriculum committees, and more importantly, a vehicle, an avenue the curriculum committees can use. But that being said, I think that in order to move forward with a model that we can agree on sort of unanimously, I'm in support of option 2, but I'd like to put a request into Mark that you make it abundantly clear to the curriculum committees that we're here as a board to support them. So I know that you would do quarterly report outs. I know that you would provide us with information that came up, but also remember that if they have a question about the direction the board's heading or funding, or if we propose this, what would happen, to use us as a board, to wait, to put it on the next agenda for the meeting so that we can talk about it, bring the appropriate people here, because we want to make sure that we don't hold anything up, that we make it completely clear and transparent to the members of the committees they were here to support them, and not drive their curriculum, but rather support them in their efforts to build the curriculum. So,
Ms. Guglielmi.
I mean, along the same vein as Andy just said, I think that another thing that would be helpful is, aside from, I think, the quarterly update, if we were to go with the no liaison model, would be, perhaps some agendas for upcoming meetings. It really opens it up to any of the board members if they're interested in a particular topic, because I really don't see it as a laissez-faire situation, but I see it as more of an opportunity for this board to be able to participate and get informed all at the same time without funneling those updates through one of us. So I think, like, if there's happens to be a big all-day meeting where it's really going to be analyzed, it would be helpful if the agenda is distributed to the group, that if you could send that to us. It may be that for whatever reason one of us has a particular expertise in an area, very interested in offering input, that we have that available to us. So that would be my caveat.
Wonderful. Any other comments on the motion? I too am going to support the option 2 no liaison model for all the reasons already stated without restating them. I think one of the things that came to light for me recently that I think bodes well for us moving forward is that the model that's in place today that we're voting on, a liaison model, hasn't always been the case either. That 15 or 20 years ago, curriculum liaisons were put in place, and it was an adaptation that was made. And what we're doing today is another adaptation to essentially determine what's going to work for this board moving forward, and to recognize that if it's not working in the future or needs to be fine-tuned, that we have that capability of doing it. And so, while I saw some benefit as serving as a liaison, what I was hearing at the table was that there were disconnects perhaps with other people in terms of what was going on in particular curriculum committees, and so therefore we needed to at least look at it. And so I too will support option number 2, the no liaison model. So with that said, we'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor of Shannon's motion for option number 2 signify by saying aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. And what is the student rep's opinion?
In favor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Marcus. That now takes us to item number 9 on tonight's agenda, request for New Hampshire School Boards Association resolutions. At our last meeting, I shared that we received correspondence calling for resolutions to be undertaken at the New Hampshire School Boards Association Delegate Assembly. Is that correct? In January. They're due by the end of October, October 26th, 23rd. Okay, we're shy by 3 days. So we'll make sure we get them in. So the request that I had at our last meeting is if there is a resolution that you would like this board to vote on and to be sent as a resolution from this board to the New Hampshire School Boards Association to bring it forward tonight. So are there any resolutions that board members would like the Merrimack School Board to take up? There don't need to be. So seeing none, we'll close the agenda item. And that will take us to item number 10, other correspondence. Is there correspondence to come before the board? Vice Chair Barnes.
I received an email from Jody Valancourt of the Town Council knowing that we had a position regarding the pipeline to keep us updated. And Marge, I think I was copied. I think it was sent to you actually, Marge. Oh, good. And it basically is stating that the Amherst plan to have the pipeline closer to Thornton's Ferry School is the one that's being put forward by Kinder Morgan. So it's also going to go through the aquifer that affects all of our drinking water, and it will be going to it will be going in, basically in motion in October to be presented and approved. All that being said, this board still has an opportunity to have a position about drinking water. I believe the second set of designs, I'm not exactly sure because there are a couple different maps sent through, that might be 1,100 feet now from Thornton's versus the 500 feet it originally was. So, I mean, it's basically right outside of our motion scope, our position scope to keep it 1,000 feet. But still, it's like basically throwing, it's almost an insulting level of adjustment.
Proximity.
But, and again, the water source is still going to be impacted if we don't have safe drinking water, if there's a break in the pipeline. So I still think that we as a board have more that we can do. I recommend we do it. I know that's on the agenda for a motion tonight, but we are running out of time if we do want to do anything about it.
What strikes me, I'm hearing about this now. What strikes me is that, so this is information that came forward to the council, I'm assuming, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how Councilwoman Valancourt, right, got it to you. At our meeting where we took up our vote and our position on the proposed, what was at the time the proposed alternate route, we took a position on that, and we also, this board directed me to contact Town Council Chair Harrington to discuss coordination amongst the two bodies at a time that made the most sense as it related. When I made the call, the comment from Town Council Chair Harrington was, not right now, but I can see that it will make sense in the future. It strikes me that this development is exactly the sort of development that is important for the two bodies to be working together. At the time, she had expressed concerns about the alternate route as well, the aquifer, and other issues that I think are under the town's purview. And so it strikes me that, I have not received a call that now would be the time, but I am certainly open to calling Town Council Chair and asking her if she doesn't agree that now is the time for this board and the council to be working in unison on this issue.
It sounds like we wouldn't even have enough time to get together a joint meeting, and that's what's alarming.
Okay.
So, coming forth, and I think it came late last week, honestly. I was pretty much out of pocket from last Wednesday to this morning. So I got it on my phone.
Okay.
In the Adirondacks. So it's been but honestly, it's something we need to bring up, so.
Okay. Ms. Gualiumi.
And adding to that, I think part of the issue is that this alternate route, or now I'm hearing, there's potentially another alternate route, but they all seem to kind of, these alternate routes, which seem, from what we've been told, look like they're going to go right by Thornton's Ferry School. This was all thrown out by Kinder Morgan like a week before the filing. It looks like there may be an extension, because I did get something in the mail as a citizen about another hearing opportunity or something to that effect. But the thing is we don't have much time. We weren't given much time. This was definitely something that was put out there. Just, the filing is happening, and so whatever these routes are, we have to think about how we're going to make any swift communication we need to make, because we don't have a lot of time. And The other thing is, I think that when we did make our position, a while back, we did get some immediate attention from that. And I think that there was, our elected officials were paying attention, had gone to Washington. So I think there's some work that we can do, that we need to do right away, which is, first of all, I don't know, and maybe it's a call to the Kinder Morgan office to find out whether they're talking 1,100 feet from any edge of our property, or are they measuring it directly from the school? Is it really 1,100 feet, or is it 500 feet? But I have some really serious concerns with this going by the area where our children will be playing in this district, and I do think we have to, either if we have to write letters or whatever, we don't have much time to do that.
Okay. I don't know what our capability would be of doing this. I'm not even sure they would respond, but inviting them to explain the proposed route at one of our meetings is certainly an option. In a public session, that would certainly get attention, right? Mr. Schneider.
One of the things that concerns me a little bit is I've been following this, and most of the information is coming through side and back channels, and somebody heard from somebody, and it would be good to contact the town council to find out, to Chairman Harrington, exactly what they're hearing directly from either FERC or from Kinder Morgan on this, because I know that there's a protocol, as was extended to the other towns, about changing impacts to towns. So I want to make sure that we know formally what's being presented to the town of Merrimack to understand. We've all seen the different pictures and graphics that Facebook has had about the different things. One can, like me, take Google Maps and try to map from the line to where I think the edge is, and depending on whether you're doing it, it's anywhere between 1,200 and 1,000. But does it affect the back playground, or does it not? I mean, my understanding is, and also again reading, and this isn't the formal, is that they haven't done the formal survey. This is just sort of drawing a line on a map where they think it needs to go. So as opposed to formal surveying the area to see what the impacts are. So I think generally the board has concerns over this big time, what's going on, but I want to make sure that we follow this in a proper protocol to make sure that we do it so it's meaningful feedback rather than just us yelling into the wind that it doesn't get heard. So
okay.
I mean, at least finding from the council chair, what the town is going to do based on this and how they're treating it would be good for us to know.
Yep. Ms. Gwelliu.
And then again, I believe Kinder Morgan has set up a regional office or an office in Amherst too. So if we want to hear it, I guess, straight from the horse's mouth, if we want to validate do any fact checking or validate what the latest state of the proposed route is or any of the deadline dates, they should have, may not be all of the answers, but it's a piece of the puzzle.
Amherst was a cozy location for setting up, as opposed to
that's quite possible.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, thank you for the info. It's all net new info to me. So I will contact Chair Harrington, and I will also call the Kinder Morgan office in Amherst to see what additional info we can get as a board. Any other comment on that? We're on correspondence. Is there other? Well, it became a topic. Is there other correspondence to come before the board? I had one piece of correspondence from a parent related to the middle school student handbook that I responded to. That's it. Seeing no more correspondence, comments from the board. Vice Chair Barnes.
I'm on a roll. I just wanted to let you know I learned on WMUR about the vandalism at the tennis courts. Well, I guess there was a fire, some damage to the ramps and I'm getting this all from WMUR, so that's all I have to work with, and that they're looking for information that might lead to who did this. And unfortunately, this has been a topic we've discussed at this table so many times, and I'll just say it, very disappointed to hear about something so relevant to this board's this board's discussion on the topic on WMUR. So it's kind of like finding out your uncle died from the obituary. So, that skate park. Did I say tennis courts? I'm sorry. I clarify, tennis courts. So there was a vandalism act. I know we discussed about not having cameras, about having the hours of operation be when the kids are in school. I mean, lots of problems. But unfortunately, this is an area where it's on our school district property, and we found out about it on the news. And it was very disappointing that this happened. But first and foremost, an announcement to the public. If you know anything about this, please contact the Merrimack Police Department. And we as a school district would appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider.
On a different tone altogether, I harp periodically about how old I am and how long I've been here and how dinosaurs roam the halls and things like that. But over this past weekend, the Merrimack High School class of 75 had their 40th reunion up at the Puritan Back Room in Manchester. We had about 175 I'm glad the folks at home didn't hear it. We had in 1975, Merrimack had approximately 175 students graduate. We had over 50 show up, and then spouses incremental, but it was a very large turnout. Special thanks to Pat Cunningham at the high school for loaning the Merrimack High School banner. People had a good time having pictures taken with it and stuff, but it shows that even the product of the Merrimack School District some eons ago still want to get back together and celebrate the sneeze that just and celebrate both the success as well as the camaraderie that we had. So just thought I'd share some of these positive things that happen on occasion. So.
That's wonderful. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 11, new business. Any new business to come before the board? Vice Chair Barnes.
So I was on a roll. Last year was the first year we had Camp Sargent instead of Camp Mytina. And I know that there were some differences. I know there's some things that we were talking about at the board level. And that were going to happen because we're not doing Mytina. And I just wanted to do a review of what actually happened last year in lieu of it and whether it met the expectations. And I can tell you because I have a 7th grader this year and an 8th grader who was a 7th grader last year who was at the substitute, which is Camp Sargent. And I know a couple of things that I was expecting to hear about that never happened. Things like Greater Woods. None of the kids went on Greater Woods. I know this because 3 members of the Greater Woods subcommittee had 7th graders last year, and not one of them went out on Greater Woods once. So 3 members of the subcommittee on Greater Woods have 7th graders, now 8th graders. None of our kids went on Greater Woods at all last year. So we knew that was supposed to be supplemental, and it didn't happen. It's in our backyard. So when we're talking about that kind of thing,
item. Yeah.
I think it'd be a great agenda item for us, and even because I am still on Greater Woods, I think it will help us to say, well, what do you really want to do with it? So when we go back to those Greater Woods subcommittees, it can be something that we can foster on the back end to help the district.
Great.
So I think that it'd be a great agenda item to have in place.
Good follow-up. So, Marge or Mark, do you think we could perhaps get an update on?
I think probably either the second meeting in October or November, given the fact that you're going to have a contingent from Amherst next time, which is going to be a big meeting. So
That'd be
I
great.
would just say in the future.
Great.
Ms. Gualiumi.
And I would actually say that I think this year's camp is like September 29th, 30th, October 1st. So it sounds like we might also get some feedback from this year's program as well. Then if we bump into.
Yep, into October. Yep. Great. Any other new business to come before the board? Seeing none, we'll move to item number 12, committee reports. Ms. Gualiumi promptly raises her hand.
Okay, so I had a Parks and Rec meeting last week, so I was informed at that meeting regarding, I guess, the vandalism at the skate park had just happened. And they had shown a couple of pictures of what had happened. Apparently it was in the porta potty, and there was hand sanitizer used as a flammable substance, and a tennis shoe left somewhere that was part of it, and then the graffiti, I guess, as well. So I wanted to let you know that. And also, the other item I think of interest that came from that meeting in particular was that the town council recently has approved some funding at Wasserman Park, which is basically going to take a permanent water line that's going to go into the function hall, so that the town can get year-round use from it. They're exploring with a sprinkler, so they need the sprinkler system and the water in there to be able to accommodate all of the requirements. What that does is it opens up some future rental income for the town, as well as some program considerations. Some of the things that are being kicked around are things like maybe daycare, after-school programs, maybe starting it out potentially with Thornton's Ferry. It's just some ideas at this point. There's nothing that's been determined, but I wanted to let you know that it looks like there will be some different use, as well as they're also looking at being able to rent out some of the cabins as well to groups and whatnot. So it sounds like some exciting things that are happening, and that's all.
Great, thank you. Other committee reports? Mr. Schneider.
There was supposed to be a committee, a planning and building committee meeting this week, I believe, to go over our actions, but because we didn't take any actions last time, we just started discussing. We didn't take actions tonight. I believe they're trying to set one up for probably in October. They're not going to do it right away, so we'll make sure that we jointly, myself with the administration, shares our changes and the rationale behind it for the planning and building committee, because I think it's important they understand what we did and why we did it and how we're in support. One of the things they're probably going to not like is the fact we didn't talk about SAU sped building, but that's out of our purview for this year's planning, given where it currently sits. So I will have to make sure we share the planning, what we've talked about in the past, that we'll start next year to more proactively push it. So,
great. Thank you. Any other committee reports? Seeing none, I will move to item number 13, public comments on agenda items. And seeing no interested public, I will close public comments, and we will take a moment to sign the manifest, and I will entertain a motion to enter non-public session per RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, subsections A, B, and C. Moved by Mr. Powell, seconded by Vice Chair Barnes. Ms. Gualiumi, how do you vote? Mr. Schneider, how do you vote? Mr. Powell, how do you vote?
In favor.
Vice Chair Barnes, how do you vote?
In favor.
And the chair votes in favor. What's the student rep's opinion? He's in favor. So that motion carries 5-0-0. Thank you, everyone. Good night.